Today, I've got back on this episode a good friend of mine who I've been communicating with over the past few years inside Rheumatoid Support. His name is Gabe. He was on our show back in May 2019 talking about the improvements that he's made with psoriatic arthritis. And since then, he has continued to experiment with some variations and modifications in his approach. And he has provided several updates over the past month or so inside Rheumatoid Support, telling us what he's been doing that has been working. And so Gabe has agreed to come back on the show and to talk about what's working for his psoriatic arthritis since we last spoke. So I hope that today is really valuable and you can get lots of little tips and modifications yourself so that you can continue to work on your health. So welcome, Gabe.
Thanks very much, Clint. I'm very glad to be here.
We've enjoyed a long chat before we hit record on this episode because we really do get along well. And I really do enjoy listening to your life and the choices you've made, both personal and with your health and so on. And so, I consider this a really enjoyable opportunity for me to connect with you. It's like just speaking with a friend. So again, thanks for coming on.
Likewise, yeah, I'm very glad to be here and also to be of service to anybody who might find this information valuable too. Yeah.
Well, let's do it. Let's talk about psoriatic arthritis. So give us the little recap. Nearly 2 years ago, we had you on here. You shifted to Paddison Program. That's plant-based eating, lots of exercise. You were overcoming several things with your health. But tell us again a little recap where we were 2 years ago, how far you'd come before we then talk about what you've done since.
Sure. So I found the Paddison Program on Christmas Eve of 2018, which really was a great gift. And at that point, my left knee had been swollen with a lot of fluid for 8 months. And I had had psoriasis for 4 or 5 years and a lot of other strange symptoms for many years prior to that. So migraines that would leave my hands numb, and also a lot of fatigue and a lot of GI issues. And so when I found the Paddison Program, I had been contemplating going on to methotrexate. And fortunately, I jumped on to the Paddison Program before trying methotrexate, and it worked for me. I was just on the edge of taking that. Within really the first couple of days of starting your program, I knew that it was working, and just in terms of my energy levels. So that I had a 2-week break during that Christmas period from school. I'm still a student. So that 2-week break was great because I was doing all sorts of strange stuff in the kitchen, making a lot of rice, and it was working. It still took 3 months for the swelling to go down, but I never had to go on to methotrexate, and eventually the swelling subsided. My energy came up, and my psoriasis still lingered for a while. And it really wasn't until I started getting into some of the more complex probiotics that the psoriasis went away. And so I had very significant psoriasis on my eyebrows, my ears, and just large flakes falling off, and my scalp also. So once I started to add some of the more complex probiotics, in particular for me, water kefir, that really helped. Things started to go down. Now, that was the first year of the Paddison Program. As I got into the second winter, my left knee started swelling again, and I had attributed this to a slight amount of oil that I had ingested, and like a very, very minor amount, with some garlic salt that I'd been trying. And also just the stress of winter and maybe a lack of diversity in my diet. During the winter break, I kind of got lazy and wasn't cooking as much diversity, and still getting my greens in, but eating the same thing. and also I introduced nuts at that point. So in any case, the point is that basically a year after having great success with your program, my swelling came back, not nearly to the same extent, but enough to stop me from playing basketball, which was what I cared about at the time. So it was at that time that I joined your forum. That would have been maybe the January or February of 2020, maybe. And you suggested right away, you suggested to me to try an earthing mat. And I got an earthing mat. I thought it was kind of crazy. I thought, man, I'm going to electrocute myself. I don't know what I'm doing here. But I read the science. I read some of the PubMed review articles. And the earthing mat really helped. And so that's kind of what got me being a member of your forum and got me doing some of the more the work that we're here to discuss, which is after having success, how do you maintain that success, and how do you deal with the occasional setback and various things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Already touched upon some really, really juicy topics here. So we've talked things that I've written down in addition to our notes before we started. We've got the earthing mat, numb hands I wanted to mention as well. That hasn't come up. And the water kefir for psoriasis. So we got lots of directions here before we even get onto the list of things that we have ready for our audience here that they can benefit from. Let's in no particular order of priority, but we'll speak shortly about the earth for a short period about the earthing mat. I'll do another episode about this and show the science so that we don't just sort of brush over it too shallowly, because this needs more attention. But in short, the concept of earthing was originally brought to my attention by a different podcast. Actually, it was a podcast that I no longer listen to for various reasons, so I won't mention. But they had a great guest on there, Clint Uber, who wrote the book, about earthing. I bought the book, read the book, and it's fascinating. Basically, the concept being that we develop electrostatic charge due to interactions with carpet and wearing flip flops and rubber-soled shoes. And that by using these artificial lifestyle, accessories and so forth, we develop this small but can be significant electrostatic charge. And that just by connecting with the earth, by sitting or walking and just standing barefoot on the earth, then dissolves that charge. And that practice that humans have done for, the beginning of humanity, which is walking around on the earth, has been lost since particularly the introduction of rubber-soled shoes. And so, as you said, there's science supporting health benefits of going barefoot, and that we can artificially create that earthing experience by putting, say, a mat down on a bed, or putting a mat down under your feet at your desk, or to sit on your chair. If you can't, for example, where you are now, where it's snowing, get outside and connect with the earth in a more of a conventional way. So I'm glad that really helped. And that was delightful for me, because I went through a period, I go through phases where I recommend things heavily because I'm doing it, or I've just read the science and I'm passionate about it. And then time passes, and then I recommend something else, which we're about to talk about in a minute, the sprouting, right? So we'll talk about it. Yeah. So let's close out the earthing mat, knowing that I'm going to do more about that in a future episode.
Sure.
By saying that it really helped you, right? To get rid of some
It really helped. And my understanding is basically that it's a low risk, really high reward thing. And actually another angle on it is that of all the things that we do on your program, it's actually one of the easiest things that there is. I plug in a mat to the wall and I sleep with that, touching my skin every night. Yeah. And that just helps tremendously. And I can tell when I don't do it for a day or two. And so I thought, okay, well, $30 for one of these mats. I got to try this. And I'm very thankful that it worked so well.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And you say that if you don't do it for a few days, you start to notice. What's your sign that you haven't done it?
Um, well, the first thing I notice is just how well I sleep or
Yeah,
don't sleep.
yeah.
So since I sleep with it, the sleep is a big thing for me. I probably average just by earthing alone. I think I average 15 minutes to 30 minutes more sleep a night.
Mm,
Um,
yeah,
if I were, keeping better track of that, I'd have a more precise number. But that's
yeah,
kind of my sense.
yeah.
The second thing I would say is simply there's kind of a sense of calm in my body. Um,
Hmm.
it's just this sort of sense of uh, things are kind of quiet. And,
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if it's inflammation exactly being calmed down. It's probably a combination of some other things, but it's really just this kind of peacefulness and ability to withstand. And then the final thing I'd mention is um, my ability to withstand stressors is greater. So physical stressors, psychological stressors. I noticed the mat dampens those experiences a bit for me. That sounds like some extravagant claims, but it really is one of the most helpful things that I do.
Yeah. I'm often reluctant to go too far down these discussions without supportive evidence. And so I think that this is one of those rare instances where, you know what, it does deserve us to spend some minutes talking about this because um, whilst we're not discussing the science right now, there is science about this. And if you just feel better from doing it, then something's going on. And it's undeniable in your case. You saw a specific point in time when you felt better from doing it. So that's one thing, which is great, the earthing mat. So we like that. Um, and then you mentioned the water key for your psoriasis. Can we stay on track for a moment
Sure.
with the inflammation in the joints? Are there other things we want to go to those first before we get to water kefir, or does that overlap?
In terms of helping with the swelling in the joints,
Yeah.
um, well, one thing I would mention too that I didn't put in the notes, but for those folks who have psoriatic or arthritis in particular, one thing that's really helpful as an exercise to keep in mind are eccentric exercises. So, so one of the things that I've noticed in my time with this arthritis and even predating it a bit is that I have a tendency to get these kind of tendon injuries. So, um, in conventional medicine, we would refer to these as tendonitis and think, oh, that's no big deal. Just take some ibuprofen, it will heal up in a couple of days. But what I've noticed is that when my inflammation is high, I get a lot of these tendon issues, and seemingly more so than most people. But that's anecdotal. I haven't studied it. But in any case, one of the things that I dealt with last summer or 2 summers ago, actually, was I had a little bit of tendonitis in both my Achilles tendons. And so one of the things that I did that was extremely helpful in healing from that issue is something called eccentric heel drops. And
Hmm.
so an eccentric heel drop is I can demonstrate with my hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you imagine you're standing with your toes here on the book, what you do is so you have your 2 feet here. With both feet, you go up. And then say that your right heel is the one you want to fix. You lift your left leg up and you slowly lower down just a little bit below parallel. And while you're doing that, you want to kind of stretch the Achilles. And so it will hurt just a slight bit, but the pain there, what's going on is that you're lengthening the tendon. And as you're lengthening it, you're allowing it to heal in a way um, where it doesn't shorten up. So you're
Hmm.
allowing it to lengthen at its full length and heal at its full length. And you're stimulating the healing process. And so for a lot of these tendon issues that I've had, um, these eccentric exercises were extremely helpful. And I had one in my forearm, my Achilles. So you just find a way to do the eccentric work, and it can be really helpful. So that may be something too that would be a nice nugget for somebody with psoriatic arthritis.
Absolutely. So eccentric meaning the reverse of a contraction, correct? It's the it's the reverse muscle direction that it's sort of conventionally thought of. So an eccentric is like relaxing the weight under tension.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's the opposite of what we tend to think is the hard work.
Yeah,
when you're doing that bicep curl, you're thinking, oh, it's the letting down piece. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. And so in simple terms, it's like doing a calf raise, but in the reverse direction and then going slightly below horizontal to get a stretch at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. Great tip. And so for tendonitis, you found these eccentric exercises to be helpful for your elbow and also the Achilles.
Yes, and the reason I mentioned that in particular for psoriatic is that my understanding of psoriatic, or at least my experience of it, is that it's a kind of arthritis that tends to attack the tendons, so it's fortunately, I'm not losing cartilage and bone tissue in the way that somebody with RA is. For whatever reason, my arthritis attacks the tendons, the soft tissue. And so these eccentric exercises, along with basic strength training in the gym, I find to be pretty helpful.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. Well, we've got two fabulous suggestions there. Let's talk about potentially what about we move on to the sprouting? How about you want to speak of sprouts?
I'm glad that you asked. Okay, so I brought some of my sprouts out here.
Yeah, look at that. If you're not watching this and you're listening to this, find this same point on the recording on YouTube, because Gabe has produced the most epic bowl of homegrown sprouts.
Yeah, look so these are this is fenugreek.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically I got a book by a guy named well, I can't remember his name. I can send you the link and you can
overlay
it. But in any case, he has this method whereby he grows enough sprouts for a little green salad every day of sprouts. And he started doing this in the winters. He lives in Vermont. He started doing this with his family just as a way to have green stuff. And also just it's fun because it turns over so quickly. So in about 7 to 10 days, you can have a bowl like this, which is just about ready to harvest. One of the things that you'll see, I don't know if this is picking it up in the camera exactly, but
I see it well.
The some of these still have the seeds, kind of the seed shell on them, and as they grow and as the two green leaves start to split, that shell will come off. So it saves you some of the work of picking those off. But in any case, in 7 to 10 days, you have these nice green sprouts. And the best part is that you don't need special sunlight. You don't need special lamps or anything like that. I'm in the middle of winter in northern Indiana. We have 1.5 feet of snow on the ground, and I'm growing these in my room. The basic process is that you get a little bit of kind of a seed starting germination mix. So I have a big tub of this soil just behind my couch, and then you get a little bit of compost and you get a little bit of fertilizer. I use kind of like a sea kelp type fertilizer.
Yeah.
And what you do is you soak the seeds overnight. You get the soil a bit moist. And I use a bowl. He recommends using an aluminum pan, but you can use whatever you want. And you put a little bit of the soil in. on top of the compost and the fertilizer, and then you take the soaked seeds and you just lay them over the top. Then you take some newspaper, you soak the newspaper and put that over the top of the seeds, and then you keep them in a dark place for 4 days. And what's kind of interesting about seeds is that during those first 4 days, they don't need the sun to grow because all the energy is stored up in the seed. And so what will happen is that after you pull it out after a couple of days from the dark place, you can imagine newspaper sitting on top of this. The newspaper will kind of fall off to the side as the seeds just sprout up, push it off. And then, the seeds are ready to get some sun. And when they get in the sun, that's when they turn green. We all know from our basic science, that's when the chlorophyll comes in. Wow. And so usually what I do is I let them green for a couple of days before they start to get bitter. They usually get bitter when the little leaves give way to bigger leaves. So that's the point that you want to snip them.
Right.
So I take some scissors and I just kind of pull them up by the roots a little bit, pull them up like this, and just snip it and throw out my green smoothie. So that's how that works.
Put them in smoothies, do you? Yeah.
I usually do. I find some of them to be a bit like some of the radishes and so on. By themselves, I find them a bit tough to get down. So mixing in with some banana and, it makes it a little easier. Yeah.
Yeah. But well, that's certainly impressive. We buy the sprouts, and I have not yet moved across to the advanced approach, which is growing them at home. Let's now answer the question that's burning in people's minds. Why would you do that? Why would we be wanting to go to such lengths to create sprouts?
Sure. So, as you mentioned in a lot of your work, sprouts have all sorts of good stuff in them. So they have, in particular, digestive enzymes. They also have a lot of good micronutrients, just really jam-packed at very high concentrations in them. And so it's a really great way to get a lot of good nutrients in, a lot of bang for your buck in that way. Moreover, sprouting makes things easier to digest. Mm-hmm. And so for example, the soaked almonds that you recommend in your program, that's kind of the start of a sprout. It's kind of the same concept. So when you sprout something, when you have a seed, say a flax seed, this is something I haven't got the flax seeds yet, but flax seeds have a lot of good things in them. By themselves, they can be a little hard to digest because the shell of the seed has, I don't know if this is the right word exactly, but anti-nutrients in it.
Right.
It has a coating that makes it hard to digest. Mm-hmm. And when you sprout, what you're doing is you're telling the seed, okay, it's time to grow. You can get rid of that protective shell that's meant to protect against insects and also meant to protect against animals eating it or the digestive tract. So if an animal eats it, hopefully that shell protects it enough that when it comes out the other end, it will still grow. Hopefully, in any case, once you kind of coax the plant out of its shell, then you get all those nutrients that the seeds have, but in a form that's great, easier to digest. So that's one of the benefits of sprouts, along with all sorts of other things.
Yeah, well explained. I think that they are absolutely sensational for health and digestion and longevity and so on. And I have been eating mung bean sprouts, right? The white ones that you see on Asian salads often, with most of my meals for the last month or so. And I've just done it because I just want to see how much better I digest, whether or not it affects like the odor of my gas and so on, and the sort of bowel movements that I get, all these sort of like beautiful experiments. Yeah. I can say for the most part that it gets a tick, but the non-quantitative thing that I've experienced the most is just more vibrancy. I just feel happier. Just a feeling of well-being that you can't really describe in other terms. Just feel healthier for doing it. It's a weird thing. I feel happy eating these sprouts all the time. And therefore I do it. I digest well, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, I wish that I had paid a little more attention when I introduced sprouts. I was also introducing some other things, and I just knew they were so good for me and easier to digest and all that. So I can't say that I've noticed like too much, but I was in a pretty good place when I introduced them. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But I would say that on two fronts, one of the other experiments I've done with sprouts is tried sprouted flowers for various things.
Yeah.
Now, definitely more of an advanced thing. I would think, based on the kind of the reintroduction sequence. But the basic idea would be that a flower that comes from sprouted plants, say sprouted sprouted wheat or something like that, you're taking away those anti-nutrients, and then you're also getting some of the better nutrients and just the easier to digest kind of flour. So that might be an experiment worth having for somebody who's interested in it. But one of the other benefits of growing sprouts this way is it's just nice having something green in the house. And especially for me in the middle of winter here, it's nice to actually feel some connection with nature. That it's not, freezing cold out in the snow, and actually makes me feel like I'm a little bit of a gardener. I take care of my little plants each day. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to do it all. And once you get the setup and the routine down. Now there are a lot of other ways to grow sprouts. The method you'll see most commonly is somebody will take a jar with kind of a mesh lid, and you take the seeds, you soak them, and you flip them and let them dry out. I tried that method with a cloth bag, kind of a similar concept, or a hemp bag. And what I found was that it was difficult for me to get the seeds to grow in the first place because I could never figure out the right level of hydration. And they need to be pretty moist for them to grow. And where I live now in the wintertime here, it's very dry. The second thing that one of the reasons I chose this particular method was that you're not as concerned about getting fungus growing on the sprouts themselves. So, and the reason for that is that the kind of germination mix, it's well ventilated. So, and also the particular kind that I get has some bacteria in there that are kind of antifungal. And so you get this kind of nice benefit of not having to worry as much. And it's also easier when you grow it this way and you have the jar, you have to flip that 3 or 4 times a day. With this, 5 minutes, set it and forget it. 4 days later, I come back and put it on the windowsill.
Ain't nobody got time for flipping.
No, not with my busy schedule, at least. So plus the final thing I'd mention is that the root systems to these are pretty neat. And what they do is these will actually go down basically to the bottom of the bowl. And that's where the compost and the fertilizer are. And so you're also picking up some of the nutrients from that too. So it's this kind of neat. It's a neat thing.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Awesome. Well, that is a lesson on sprouts that we haven't had before on the show. So thank you very much for that. And
you're welcome. You're welcome.
We're all now going to go and follow your technique. Now let's move on to the next tip that you have for us. The vitamin D. It's been a big one, hasn't it? You've mentioned this several times to me offline.
Yes.
Let's talk about vitamin D and how that's helped you and, just your current regimen.
Sure. So following on the forum, I was listening to the various folks talk about vitamin D and also the high dosage vitamin D stuff. And so I started doing my own research and thought, well, at the very least, I need to go get tested and just know what my starting point is. When I got tested, I was at 23 nanograms per milliliter, which is low. So in the United States, the measurement that we use is nanogram per milliliter. I think that if you want the nanomoles, you basically just multiply by 2 or 2.5. So it's 56 nmol, I think. You multiply by 2. In any case, the point is it was low. In the U.S., the recommendation, at least on the blood test that I got, I think this comes from the Institute of Medicine and a Harvard researcher, is that at the bare minimum, you want 30 nanograms per milliliter to avoid things like rickets. Now, some of the high dosage stuff that I've been researching and learning about, and I actually just even Dr. Michael Greger on Nutrition Facts, he goes through some studies where he looks at optimal dosages, optimal levels of vitamin D. And what Dr. Greger says is that if you were to take somebody in the wild, so to speak, if you were to test somebody, say in a place that's near the equator in Africa, I think that he said that they would be at something like 115 nanomole per milliliter. So something like 50 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. Now that's somebody in the middle of the average, in the middle of the distribution.
Yeah.
So you'll likely have people just kind of who spend a lot of time in the sun near the equator, quite a bit above that. And that raises another question, which is, well, first, two questions. Is there a benefit to having a higher level of blood concentration of vitamin D? And Dr. Greger goes through in a video and he explains that to a large degree, it's better to have more vitamin D, especially for people who have autoimmune disorders, who tend to be low on vitamin D to begin with. So anyways, taking all this into account, I thought to myself, well, the toxicity of vitamin D it's pretty safe. And even the Institute of Medicine, which is on the more conservative side, says you can do 10,000 IU a day. I found a paper online, calculated how much I would need to take to get my blood level up to be the higher range of what I just said a minute ago, hoping to be up close to, say, 80 to 100 nanogram per milliliter, which sounds pretty high, but it's not in the toxic range yet. So I thought I want to just try that out. So I did 12 days of 30,000 IU, and then I've been maintaining since then at a dosage of about 15,000 IU. I got tested about a month ago, so I've only been doing this for a couple of weeks. I think I'm maybe on week 3 now, week 3 or 4. So I'll get tested again next month, just kind of see where I'm at. I felt so great doing this that I'm not looking to go too much higher. But in any case, the point is, about a week after taking the daily 30,000, I just all of a sudden just felt great. I mean, I felt really great. I was, the best way I can illustrate that is that as a student, I often fall asleep in class, and this is something that has bugged me for a long time. I've been in college now for a long time. I'm in my 4th year of graduate studies, and I still, for many years, I've fallen asleep in class. This is the first time since I've been on vitamin D, the first time in a long time that I'm not regularly falling asleep in class, which is pretty great. And not falling asleep when I'm reading. And I do a lot of reading, so that's helpful. So that's the story on vitamin D.
The vitamin D is so interesting, and it's linked to sleep. When I did the review podcast somewhat about a month ago or something, the overwhelming experience that people have when they start getting their intake up is that they sleep better. And now you're putting more fuel on the sleep benefits by saying you're more alert, potentially through better sleep at night, deeper sleep at night, potentially getting more rest. That seems to dovetail nicely.
Sure. Yeah, that's in a lot of the studies that I saw too. I would say that I've probably noticed a significant significant increase both in the quality and quantity of my sleep. I don't know, maybe on average 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes of sleep a night. Um, and also just one of the other things that I read about vitamin D is that it actually helps with melatonin production. So it sort of helps to regulate the circadian rhythm. And for me, that's a big issue because where I work, the kind of ministry that I do with young college students, it's not uncommon for me to be up, say, till 4 a.m. in the morning, working with students because some issue came up in the middle of the night. Um, so I run pretty long days. So I'll get up around 8, and then um, I'm working pretty much up through 11 or 12 at night, and then go to bed.
Mm.
And then some of these extra days on the weekends. And so one of the things that I was really concerned about when I started this kind of ministry was, how do I regulate my circadian rhythm? And how do I make sure that I'm making sure that my sleep is good? So that's a whole other can of worms to get into, but vitamin D has been helpful in that, and has also been how I've noticed the difference in my nose, just in even minimal congestion is even more minimal, which is especially relevant right now because of COVID and so on. And just I've noticed it seems to be that my respiratory system, my immune system is just more robust. So that's been a great benefit too. And actually my skin has cleared up a bit too, which is kind of cool. So, vitamin D, it's amazing. Yeah.
Nice. Just a comment that someone put under the last vitamin D episode that I did was valuable to me, and I didn't realize this. I can't remember the person's name to thank him, but he said, when you get your vitamin D measured, allow 3 days since your last dose. Otherwise, the circulating dose that you've taken artificially elevates the blood test that you're about to have done. And therefore, I would love it if you were to do that, because that will give us then your blood levels. And we wouldn't want to have a frightening figure come back with you if, given that you're doing an interesting experiment on yourself, to then make us all alarmed or something unnecessarily.
Sure. I will keep that in mind. And that's good to know.
Yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, great. And I love that discussion. Let's move on. And I'm reading off your list here so people know I've got your list that you sent me here. You talk about vitamin B complex. Tell us about the impact of that. And tell us about what that is, first of all.
Sure. So, first off, vitamin B, there's a specific complex called B100. And what that is there's a lot of vitamin Bs. You have vitamin B1, B2, B6, B12. B12 gets a lot of attention in the vegan world. And what B100 is at least 100 micrograms of each of those B vitamins. Now, so if you look at the back of the bottle, one of the things that you'll notice is that the daily value is ridiculously high for a lot of these. So it's at 50,000 percent daily intake recommended. It's a really high number. One thing to know about vitamin B is that the reason doctors tend to not worry about them is that they are water soluble. So in particular, when you have enough, one of the vitamins makes your urine really yellow. I think it's vitamin B6 maybe. And so when you reach the saturation point, you can tell when your urine is kind of a neon yellow.
You're glowing. You make the snow
exactly. So B100 is this complex of all of these different B vitamins. And according to the work of Dr. Stasha Gamenak, she's the one I've been listening to on this. But she says she's a neurologist and she works with patients, particularly with sleep issues. And she also brings in vitamin D, which I'll touch on in a minute. But um, what she says with respect to the B vitamins is that you want to get all of them in at the same time. So you don't want to do it's more helpful to do all of the Bs together because they have kind of a, the sum of the parts is greater, the whole is better than the sum of the parts type phenomenon, and they work together somehow. And she has a particular protocol which I've been sort of interested in and following myself, and also with my sister who has some sleep issues. So yeah, I don't know where you want me to go exactly with the bees here.
So
but
yeah, definitely. You've got us on the hook here. Very interested. So you the way you take it, is it via a tablet with a glass of water, and you do it at meal times? And what experiences of changes in your health have you noticed since you started doing it?
Sure. So the most important change for me, other than the change in my urine color, uh, has been that it's taken away my fear around getting migraines. Now, the connection between vitamin B and migraines is that vitamin B, the various vitamin Bs, are really important for the nervous system. And so many years ago, well, not many years ago, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, I used to get migraines where it'd start off with migraine aura, so I'd kind of lose part of my vision, and then it would quickly go to my hands, make my hands numb, and I just have tremendous amount of pain. And this was actually before I had started Paddison Program, before I even knew I had arthritis. I'd get these debilitating migraines and thought, gosh, I wonder if I have a tumor or something. I got tested for that. Um, within my first year of the Paddison Program, I discovered that there was some connection between the B vitamins and these migraines. And the way that I discovered that was that if I felt a migraine coming on, I could eat some seaweed and the migraine would subside.
Fascinating.
So yeah, it was really interesting. And so the summer that I discovered this, actually, I was very fortunate. I was in Lourdes, France for 2 months.
Wow.
Wonderful experience to be there and to pray with so many people from all over the world. And in any case, when I went over to France, I was really worried because I thought, how am I going to eat Paddison Program over here? That was a big question for me. The second was, I need to bring some seaweed with me because it's really important. And so I walked around Lourdes and I always had some seaweed in my pocket just in case I felt something coming on. So I'd eat my seaweed. And I'd done this 40 or 50 times by the point at which I knew, okay, probably a vitamin B issue. Working with a functional medicine doctor helped me identify B2 as probably the primary culprit. But in any case, I've left you with a cliffhanger, which was, how did I eat PP over in Lourdes? The answer to that is that the hotel where I was staying was run by a wonderful couple who had some dietary things of their own that they'd healed through a very strict diet, very similar to Paddison Program. So I was very blessed over there because she just made me lots of potatoes, lots of veggies, and I ate a lot of fresh fruit from the Pyrenees, region. A wonderful experience. So, okay, so vitamin B, when I do the B100 complex, my nervous system just feels solid and I don't worry about getting migraines. And I also don't worry about how much I'm eating, because one of the things that I had been doing was overeating, because that also seemed to be related to my migraines. So now I can eat at a more manageable level, which is helpful for inflammation reasons, because digestion is one of the bigger causes of inflammation. And so by making the work easier on my digestive system, I'm also limiting the inflammation related to eating too. So that's one of the other things I've noticed.
So sorry, I just didn't make the connection between how the vitamin B complex or seaweed derived, if you were getting it that way, helps with the overeating. Is it just that it seems to curb your appetite a little more by being adequately vitaminized?
Yeah, the connection is not, it's not exactly a cause and effect. Um, but one of the things that I've noticed is that I had, from so many years of getting these migraines, or at least feeling the migraine aura, one of the defense mechanisms that I had built in was that I would eat something. And this was partially because my father was hypoglycemic. And so anytime he felt his blood sugar going low, he
Oh
would eat
yeah.
something. So I had this kind of sense that, okay, if my body feels funny, I need to eat
Mm,
something. I
mm,
tested my blood sugar. My blood sugar was very good. That was not the issue, but I still had this built-in response that eating kind of helped. And in fact, it did help, because when you eat, very often you're getting your vitamin Bs. And most nutritionists will tell you that you should have no problem getting vitamin B, the various vitamin Bs from what you're eating. And I'd been eating, very strictly a Paddison program for 2 years, and really making an effort to get vitamin B rich things into my diet. So, for example, um, lots of mushrooms, soaked almonds when I could handle them. They're sort of in and out for me.
yeah.
And lots of seaweed, lots of dark leafy greens. I eat, you know, big bags of dark leafy greens each day. And what was interesting to me was that even with all of this, I wasn't getting enough in to really have a nice supply in my
Mm,
body. And so I've speculated, I don't know the answer to this, but I've speculated that it's probably a combination of a few things. Maybe an absorption problem, maybe maybe just I need more than
mm,
most folks, for various
mm.
reasons. Um, and yeah, so I don't know what the answer is between
Right.
those, but the extra supplementation has been really helpful.
So it stopped the migraines and the related hand numbness, and that's been gone for as long as you've been taking it.
Yes, yeah, it hasn't even been a concern. So I used to worry about any kind of fasting or missing a meal, because I thought, oh no, that's going to trigger a migraine.
Right.
And now I can eat a lot less, or even skip meals, or I have a lot more flexibility when it comes to dealing with, spontaneous situations in life.
Yeah.
I'm not as tethered to my food.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the other thing, and maybe this is where I can bring in the vitamin D connection too, is that um, I think it's also contributed to this real uptick in my energy levels.
Mm,
So the B vitamins are really important for metabolism purposes, from what I understand.
mm.
And what Dr. Gomanek, her protocol, what she's learned as a neurologist, um, is that one of the factors with vitamin B production is that in the microbiome there are bacteria that produce their own vitamin Bs.
Yeah, I was
So we
going
hear
to
about,
go there.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So we hear about this in the vegan world all the time, because there's some bacteria that can produce B12. I think, maybe I
Yeah.
might be wrong.
I'm cautious about anything other than recommending supplementation for B12. But I know that the other B vitamins, or B vitamins in general, are produced via bacteria. So an improved microbiome tends to be an improved B vitamin portfolio.
Yes, and I, just for the record too, I supplement with B12 too, because I figure
Yeah.
it's, it's can't hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but in any case, what she has found is that when you have a lack of vitamin D for a long enough period of time, it changes the microbiome in such a way that it's less able to produce vitamin B. And so she has this protocol where she'll get the vitamin D up to 60 to 80 nanogram per milliliter for 3 months, with alongside supplementing with this B100 complex. And what that has done for her patients who have sleep trouble, and not typical sleep apnea trouble, but these are, say, young, trim, thin, athletic women who have trouble sleeping, who have restless leg syndrome, things like that. She has found that the combination of vitamin D and B helps them sleep by fixing some of the nervous system issues.
Mm.
And what she also says is that after a period of time, after 2 or 3 months of the vitamin D supplementation and the vitamin B100, that if you overdo the B100, you can get some kind of pain sensation at the nerve tips, fingertips, your feet, and so on. And so what she typically does is she cuts back on the vitamin B after being at proper levels of D for 3 months. And she says that if you experience those sensations, if you stop the vitamin B100, you'll notice it within a day or two that the sensations of pain will stop.
Right.
So that's her research, and that's kind of what I've been experimenting with.
Okay. Interesting. Well, thank you. And I'm glad that it's working for you. Let's move to the last of the bullet points here, which is the water kefir.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. And then how that's helped the psoriasis aspect of your challenges, and also whether or not it has helped with the joint aspect.
So water kefir is, for those who don't know, water kefir is like dairy kefir. It's a similar kind of fermented product that is made with these little bacterial grains that sit at the bottom of a jar, and they ferment. In the case of dairy, they ferment the dairy. In the case of water, they ferment sugar water. So what I do is I have a glass bell jar. It's actually just on my kitchen counter. I could run and get it. I don't know if you want me to do that, but
Sure.
okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah. Just grab it. You know, I've never seen one of these before.
Really? Okay, well.
What? Just check your sound. We've lost the sound.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
I said really. Well, you're in for a treat there, Clint.
Okay, good.
So you see this jar here. It looks kind of creepy.
Kind of got a SCOBY at the bottom, like if you would in kombucha.
Yeah, very similar. And so what you have at the bottom here is you have these little grains, white kind of SCOBY-like type things. And what they do is they ferment this water. And it has the color that it has because what I put in here every night is I put in some white sugar, and I put in some a little bit of molasses. And what that does is that feeds the bacteria.
Again.
So anyways, that's the process of this.
More B vitamins for you too.
Yeah.
Through the molasses. Yeah.
And so what that does is it helps grow the grains, and they ferment the water, and so the water is bubbly and it has this nice kind of taste to it. And in any case, I introduced this because it's a fermented product. It's kind of down pretty far on the reintroduction list. And I introduced it when I'd been on Paddison Program for about 8 months, I think. So at that point, I had kind of reached a plateau, and I knew that miso really helped me. And so I thought, well, what's another fermented thing that I can do? And so I thought, well, water kefir is something I can do. And moreover, what I do with my water kefir is I actually take this and then I ferment oatmeal with it. So you had your podcast with Dr.
Matthews.
Talking about fermented oatmeal, and you mentioned how oatmeal is so helpful to you. Oatmeal has been very helpful to me. It's one of my best friends. So I ferment my oatmeal with this, and what I noticed in doing that was that helped me clear up some of my psoriasis within a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It really helped me move out of that plateau.
Yeah.
Now, there might also be a vitamin D connection there because that was coming out of winter. So my vitamin D, I'm sure, was low.
Right.
But in any case, it was a pretty direct a pretty direct correlation to the psoriasis going
Mm.
away.
Isn't it fascinating? And we're all looking, whilst we have given some attention to supplements, um, isn't it interesting that a much more sort of multifaceted natural approach is playing a big role here with the kefir, right? It's hard to pinpoint. Oh, it's just not one specific hormone or vitamin that's going on. We're talking
Right.
about the whole microbiome and fermentation and the effects of the fermentation on the body. So, the uptake on that suggestion for our audience will be far less than just increasing vitamin D. And yet both appear to have had significant improvements for you. So it's just interesting how the accessibility of the vitamin D is so much more straightforward. But if people were to go down the fermented kefir approach too, they might experience also great benefits. The reason that I'm a little cautious to lift it up the reintroduction guide, which I know that you just mentioned, is because I've had several people try to do fermented water kefir, and have had negative results. And I don't know whether or not that's because of the batch that they created or this way they did it, or it became, imbalanced with other microbes. I don't know. But it makes me reluctant to say, okay, everyone go and do this. It just because I've had other people say I'd tried it and it didn't work. So what you've done, obviously, is create the right batch with the right approach and got great results. So that's great. And if other people want to give it a go, fantastic. I just wanted to warn our audience that I've had some people not do well on it and had symptom problems with it.
Right. And I think that probably is because it's sort of a high sugar type thing,
Right.
too, which depending on how well how well your microbiome, like where your microbiome is, that can really be a big
Mm.
factor. That's kind of my own theory.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It's like kombucha. I had the fermented expert come on recently talk about kombucha and sauerkraut. And likewise with kombucha, it feels too good to be true. When you're drinking that, it's like, this tastes like soda. This is brilliant. This is awesome. This is good for me. I can't believe it. So, yeah, in the same way, if you've got, say, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where the bacteria is higher up the digestive tract than it should be, and maybe this isn't the right approach. But if you haven't got that, maybe it's going to be fantastic. But this is a big one where a big capital TEST. Give it a shot.
Yes.
See how it goes. So these are great. These are great suggestions. So to recap, what we covered, we talked about the earthing mat and the improved sleep that you get from that, and a sense of calmness in the body and reduced stress. Eccentric exercises for the tendonitis that you are susceptible to with PSA, and how that's helped, Achilles elbow areas. We gave sprouting a good overview, and how both of us really are going through a sprouting phase. You at a much more dedicated level than me by doing it at home. Vitamin D, how you were deficient even when eating healthily and living a healthy young man's lifestyle. It just emphasizes how humans in general are deficient, in vitamin D. And it's something we need to address. And you've been doing some mega dosing, and you're going to get tested again soon. But certainly, anecdotally, do you think it's been really helpful for both sleep, avoidance of napping, and also just feeling again of well-being? And then the vitamin B100 complex also helping, no more migraines, and again, a feeling that it's helping, contributing even more towards sleep, no more overeating. And then the water kefir has really cleared up the skin in addition to everything else that you've done. So, it sounds like you're in really good shape. And I know that, health is a moving target. We can have off days and so on, but how do you feel today with all of these additional things and an extra couple of years up your sleeve since last time we spoke?
Sure. Well, Uh, the last couple of weeks I felt awesome. Just great. High energy. I forget you're saying, but high energy, feeling as if I got my symptoms under control. But there's always that little bit to remind you that, hey, you live with an autoimmune disorder, and it seems to me that I'm always reminded of that either through, I have a tiny bit of psoriasis up here, and a couple weeks ago, before I started the vitamin D dosing, I was noticing a little bit of swelling in my knee, despite doing all the exercise, all the things that I do. And that's gone away since with the vitamin D, but it's always a question there kind of in the back of my mind. And yeah, I don't know if you still do this, if you have this habit, but I always kind of feel my knees, and I compare, okay, is there any swelling here? Is there any swelling in this knee? Does it feel about the same? That's still kind of in the back of my mind. Although what I would say now is that aside from just feeling great and feeling high energy, and two things. The first is I have a lot of confidence now that I can solve problems as they arise. So, okay, I'm getting a little swelling. Is it something I introduced to my diet? Is it something, am I not getting enough exercise? Last semester, that was a question for me because I had a stressful new job. Is it, now is it vitamin D? Is it vitamin B? These sorts of things, a lot of different tools. And I also know that I have the habits in place that I can build a lifestyle that will fix those things.
Yes.
And that's wonderful too, because this healing process it's not like it just goes away. The fact that it stays with you also means that it shapes who you are. And the way that you respond to it shapes who you are. And so when you build in these habits to your life, it starts to spill over into good habits in other people's lives too. And that's been a wonderful thing to be able to give back to people, to say, hey, I'm doing this thing. This is what I have to do to be at my best, so that in my case, so that I can serve and minister to people at really weird hours at night. I have all this energy for that because of the way that I take care of myself. And that opens a lot of doors of conversation and opens a lot of relationships I've found with my friends and my family. The final thing that I was going to mention, well, that's good enough for there.
It's certainly good. Yeah, it's certainly if that is it alone, then it's certainly adequate. To be able to, as you said, to have the capacity to handle all the other nice aspects of life, of service, both through your faith and what you do through your future direction, but also with your friendships and with your family and stuff. And of course, number one, looking after your own health so that you can have a long, healthy, happy life.
Right. And it's a great gift. And the other thing, well, maybe one other thought is that I also think that it's helped me see this as a gift, because I don't take many days for granted now. And working with the community on your website, I know that I'm very fortunate in that my disease has not progressed to the point where it's where I've had to have joints replaced yet or anything like that. But it's been a real great gift insofar as it helps me not take anything for granted. Every day that I get to walk around and not have any problems with my knee, or not have a flare up, or just not be fatigued, or not have a migraine, that's another great day. Yeah.
Oh, most definitely. That's huge, absolutely huge. So, we, as you say, there's no days that we take for granted. We wake up, we think, how's the body feel? If we tick in all the boxes, then it's a happy day, and we get into it again, and we do preventative measures so as to make ourselves have the best chance to wake up with that same set of checklist the next morning in our mind. So thank you for helping us today with these suggestions. I am going to go and have my lunch and take my vitamin D, which I have not taken for many days. You get out of the habit with it. If it's not daily, it can slip by the wayside. And eat some sprouts. And I'm going to the gym later, and I'll be doing my eccentric exercises for tendonitis that I get in my elbows. I've got a whole routine. We did that training on elbow pain that I did a few weeks ago for our support members. I've got my earthing mat upstairs. Like, I'm ticking most of your boxes. My vitamin B might need looking at, but I feel like I'm on the Gabe path to success with today's episode. So thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun. I'm very grateful, and thanks for your time and your information here, Gabe. It's awesome.
Thank you very much, Clint. Real pleasure to be with you as always. And thanks for your inspiration. Thanks for what you do with the community. And it's also wonderful to see your kids running around too. That's wonderful. So thanks for sharing all that with us.